Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Average Jocks Hockey Podcast. This week, we welcome Shaun Starr from TSN 690, as well as his own podcast, Star in the Car. This week, we did things a little bit differently. I wasn't feeling the greatest, so Joel had to do this interview solo. I hope you still enjoy it.
So, Shaun, welcome to Average Jocks Hockey Podcast. We're glad to have you on. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We'll start with probably the most controversial in the last couple weeks with Jack Edwards' comments towards Pat Maroon. I think it's uncalled for. It's unnecessary, and this isn't the first time he's made inappropriate comments. And I just don't get how many lives this guy has. Like, the NHL seems to be about correcting mistakes and nipping bad press in the butt, but I don't know how Jack Edwards isn't getting cut here.
Well, he's Boston through and through, right? I mean, it seems to par for the course. And by the way, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation today. And, covering Jack Edwards and the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens rivalries for so many years. My partner on the morning show, Connor McKenna, is infamous for having filmed Jack Edwards celebrating a Boston Bruins goal like he was some fan in the cheap seats, 6 beers deep in the third period, and the Bruins score on some idle night, and Edwards is jumping up and down doing cartwheels basically in the press box. And for those that perhaps aren't fully aware, there's a rule in the press box, and that rule is quite simple. There's just no cheering. It's not fans. These are people that are there to do jobs and their careers, and there's a certain level of professionalism that goes with that. And not Jack Edwards in that instance. But I got to tell you, for the most part, right, like a lot of the organizations pay the broadcasters. For example, like TSN 690 that pays me a salary to do their morning show with Connor McKenna. Jack Edwards is an employee of the Boston Bruins. He isn't an employee of the radio station that has the rights to the team, right? So there's a direct line there. So sometimes you're listening to a game on the radio, the more homer it becomes, the more likely it is that is a paid employee of the organization for which he broadcasts. So it wasn't cool. I have a major problem with that as a big guy myself. I don't need the attention. I don't need people poking fun. And at the end of the day, I'm a radio guy, and I have a problem with it. Pat Maroon's a professional hockey player, let alone a Stanley Cup champ. There was that fine line there, wasn't it? It was so blatantly obvious. Classless Jack, classful Pat Maroon.
Yeah,
he completely flipped that, and it was a chef's kiss of delight. What a brilliant stroke that was, flipping the script, because there was nowhere for Jack to go. Zero. He had his foot in his mouth, and Pat Maroon didn't bail him out.
Oh, 100%. I think it was like $50,000 raised within 24 or 48 hours. And I know, Jack Edwards comes out with a classic, trying to cover it up. I tried to reach out to him. I'm waiting to hear back. And it's like one too many times, I feel, for this guy. Like you said, like, he's a homer through and through. He's obviously paid by the Bruins organization. And you'd think that, especially after the media shitstorm that they just took from the Mitchell Miller stuff, that they would make sure to let anybody representing that organization, let's tone things down. Let's make sure we're really careful with what we say, what we do. We don't need any more negative image come about this organization. And not even just, and again, don't want to knock any organizations, but it's not like we're talking about the Florida Panthers or the Arizona Coyotes. Like, we're talking about an original six legacy team here drawing negative attention about themselves like twice in a matter of like 2 months.
But if anything, if there's I don't want to, silver lining's probably not the best way to put it, but it's very easy to get distracted when your team is mired in controversy and there's loss after loss after loss. The Boston Bruins are 14-0 at home this season.
Yeah.
We're well past the quarter pole of the NHL season. What are you drinking there? What's the beverage game today there?
To be honest, it's milk.
Milk? Jesus,
milk.
What are you, 6 years old? It's not 3.25%, is it?
It is not 3.25. It's not whole. It's a nice 1% milk.
Okay, good point.
I just, there was some holiday cookies around, and I'm just like, I'm going to have a nice glass of milk with a holiday cookie.
I like that. I like that. But the 14-0 at home Boston Bruins. The best thing to avoid controversy, like they did earlier this season, is just keep winning, man. You've got Patrice Bergeron, and you've got everyone below him in a pecking order. They seem very well insulated, and it's kind of the sad irony here is I had a colleague that basically lost his job because he made a fat joke at the expense of a Toronto Blue Jays player.
Yeah.
And you have Jack Edwards, the play-by-play man, the voice of an NHL team in professional sports. They wouldn't stop cracking jokes at this guy's at Maroon's expense, right? The buffet jokes, the cake jokes, and on and on and on. And look, I've been in those situations as a broadcaster many times where the jokes are flying and you're having fun and you're laughing, and then you get called into a meeting with your program director wondering what the hell you guys were thinking. Why didn't you stop the political incorrectness? So I've been there myself. Jack Edwards is there a lot. He's there a lot. But, I at the end of this, I don't think it's a fireable offense. If it's you and I shooting the breeze and, it's up to one of us to make a decision, I don't think it's a fireable offense. Maybe it's a sit down for one game and think about yourself, Jack, and don't do that again, or else. Like, we're all allowed to make a mistake. Don't make the same one twice.
Yeah. And just as you were saying that, I'm just like, this isn't the first time he's done something controversial. And literally one of the first things on YouTube is top 10 Jack Edwards moments of him making just controversial things. And it's like, he makes me cringe. And it's not just because I'm a Habs fan. Like, there's a lot of different Homer announcers, throughout the league, and no different whenever you would listen to a Dan Robertson game call. Like, these guys are reporting on behalf of the team. You're gonna hear favorable stuff. It's like watching a game in RDS for the Habs on a Saturday night compared to watching it on Hockey Night in Canada. You're gonna have a little more favoritism and love for the players than you normally would. But like, it just seems like he just doesn't care, and he'll say whatever to get the Boston crowd going, and if that means a shot below the belt, he's okay with it.
Well, it's he's called the Stanley Cup. He's been on the job for a minute, and if I'm calling it down the middle, which I like to do as often as I possibly can, and I have to, because I'm one of those sports guys that's on the radio and the media that isn't afraid to tell you that I cheer for the Canadians. This is my boyhood team. Everyone else is like, "Oh, I got into sports media. I'm not a fan anymore." Bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah.
Trust me. So, like, I understand where Jack's coming from, and the rivalry between Montreal and Boston. Jack has had a hand in that, in making the same as the radio station guys, WEEI, and their broadcasters. When Montreal and Boston, going back 20 years to the Jose Theodore Game 7 or Carey Price Game 7 back in the day, those rivalries never got better. And it's a legitimate rivalry when we're talking about things off the ice. Broadcaster versus broadcaster. Like, I remember old timers used to tell me back in the day when the Quebec Nordiques were in the league, right? And the Montreal Canadiens, when they won their last Stanley Cup, they had to get by Quebec in the first round. And the rivalry was so fierce, I kid you not, it extended to the dining room. So, like, you go to Quebec for games 3 and 4, and the Nordiques would have, like, seafood night, and they'd have Captain Highliner on the wall. They'd have fishnets and anchors and buoys everywhere. Like, that's what I'm saying. And they'd come to Montreal, and then Montreal, like, "Oh, you guys did a fish night. Okay, we're going to do Mediterranean night." You know what I mean? And like, that's what makes these rivalries so good, because now the media is involved and they're a part of it, and they drive the narrative.
So, like, how do you feel? And like you said, I like that you mentioned, like, I'm also a big guy. I also kind of took, like, okay, like, that's unnecessary. I mean, we're not playing, men's league sports, and, something said over too many drinks. Like, this is professional. It's uncalled for. Like, the guy is a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And I think he might be one of the only guys, unless you played for the Islanders way back when, to go 3 in a row. Clearly, he's able to do the job. That type of player, you're going to be big if you're. I don't want to use the word enforcer, but a bruiser, a grinder.
Tough guy.
Like, Ryan Reeves is if not that weight heavier. I mean, he's a big boy. I don't know. Like, I think it's classless. And then to come out, a few days later, make what feels like a super forced apology. And then, like, I feel like the least the Bruins could have done, or Jack Edwards, or the Bruins on behalf of Jack Edwards, would be throw money at what Patty Maroon pretty much, I don't want to say challenged, but like you
Mm-hmm.
said, flipped the script and made it a positive thing. I'm just surprised by, I don't know, the lack of, I don't know, acknowledgement or sincereness, or to write kind of the inappropriateness off. Like, I don't know. I just feel like the Bruins are 0-2 now with controversial things in the last 2 months, with how they handle things. Um, I don't know. I just feel like they could be doing more, and I'm kind of disappointed. I'm not a Bruins fan. I'm a Habs fan, and uh, it's not, has nothing to do with the rivalry or not liking Boston. I just feel like seeing the way teams are correcting mistakes nowadays, and the hoops Montreal had to jump through to try and right the Logan Mailloux thing wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
the money they've thrown and the jobs created because of something like that, and seeing Boston kind of do nothing with the Miller thing, and then pretty much nothing with this comment made. It's almost like, well, okay, they're not even trying at this point. They're not even
Well, no,
trying
I
to
think
hide the fact.
I get the impression that and from my side of the table, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that the Jack Edwards story should get as much attention as whether it's Logan Mailloux or Miller
Oh, for sure
or
not.
Hockey Canada scandals. I think they're very separate things, and I think in this instance with Boston and Jack Edwards, foot and mouth disease, I think honestly that's what they're chalking it up to. He said something stupid. He came out and apologized. It's up to you and I and everyone else to decide whether there's merit to that, and whether that was authentic or not. And
Yeah,
that's up for our judgment. Like you, I think it was horseshit, a
yeah,
PR written statement, but he did it. He said it. And ultimately, I think this story dies now, as it should. I like I said, I don't think it's a fireable offense for Jack Edwards, despite his track record of foot and mouth disease, and like everything else for a story that maybe isn't as significant or carries as much weight. They're ready for the news cycle to do what it does, and it just
hmm
okay. We have this now. Now it's time for a new news cycle, a new story, and let's forget about what happened with Jack
yeah,
Edwards and Pat Maroon.
yeah. Well, hopefully, Jack, I guess, learns from his mistakes.
No, don't even say
No,
that.
he
You're
won't.
wasting your
He
breath.
won't.
You're
As soon
wasting
as
your
I
time.
said it, I'm like, it's bullshit. Anybody that's listening to this that has heard Jack Edwards call a game knows that's bullshit.
Yeah, and
Uh,
look, I mean, I have to tell you, for as much as I despise the Boston Bruins as a kid growing up, right? Like in the Adams division, the Whalers, the Nordiques, the Boston Bruins. I hated Reggie Lemelin. I despised Andy Moog, and yet when they won their Stanley Cup, where they beat the Montreal Canadiens in the seventh game in overtime, and then
mhm,
went on to win their Stanley Cup. I kid you not, if I were to build a team, I think I would model my team after the Boston Bruins. Everything about them, not about Jack Edwards or the broadcast booth, their organizational philosophy, their team dynamic when they won that Stanley Cup. Like if you looked at anybody on that team cross-eyed, you had five guys to answer to. They were team
yeah,
tough. They were talented. And even now with the whole Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand takes less. Everybody takes less because they want to win cups and contend.
yeah.
And Bergeron is the man. I guess maybe that's the old school guy in me. I really like that. I respect that model.
Oh, and again, I agree with you 100%. Like, if you even look, because I feel like every so many years there's kind of a shift in the league where at one point, probably around the time where we had Mike Camilleri and Gianta and Gomez, whenever their team was lined up with,
Yeah.
Lucic and Krejci, Nathan Horton, Bergeron, Chara, Andrew Ference. Like, I feel like their team has always been able to adapt to the different styles of play. And now you have the Pasternak, and Taylor Hall and Bergeron and Marchand still has antics, but I find less. And
He's calmed way down, right?
yeah, so I think it's kind of they're always seem to be with the curve, the learning curve, where other teams are like, Montreal had the team of Camilleri, Gomez, Gianta. Now, where it's a faster skating game, a shooting game, we're either right behind or right ahead that learning curve. And the Bruins always seem to be right on with their team. We'll switch it up though. We'll go talk about the Ottawa Senators, and we'll get the controversies out of the way. With the first two, we'll talk a little bit about Alex Formenton, obviously not signing his contract as an RFA, so he's sitting out for the year. And I mean, to nobody's surprise, after the whole Hockey Canada investigation still going on, like, is there a path that this guy ever comes back to the NHL? Like, I don't see it.
It's you know what I mean. It's what an absolute journey, though, right? Like if we talk about where this guy was versus where we are now, um, I don't know what the path is. If I'm being truthful for you, it's one of the more fascinating aspects, right?
Mhm.
And there's no deal. The RFA announcement comes and goes, and you're left wondering about what Ottawa does, what Alex does, how do they get things together? Because you're right in the sense that, I mean, obviously we're coming off an exciting weekend for the Ottawa Senators where Brady Tkachuk's tossing the mitts. The Senators
Yeah.
are watching it like, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever seen. And, I think hockey is such a very fickle sport. I mean, obviously we know it's a team sport, right? But it's sometimes
Mhm.
I get the impression, we were just talking about this with the Bruins and their hierarchy and how it's managed, right? And I think it does prove my point in a way that the room seems sometimes so fragile.
Yeah.
And if a team is on a heater, or there's a good vibe around the room, and we could talk about that as it relates to the Canadians last year versus this year, and what a 180 it is. And that
Mhm.
Ottawa, who's been languishing and struggling in the butt end of jokes, where are the LeBreton Flats or not? What's Eugene Melnick's daughter's going to do with this team? And all this uncertainty, but they seem to have some of the pieces. And now you bring in the Alex Formenton story into the equation, and I'm like, I get it, man. Like what's Pierre Dorion saying? A trade fell through, trade speculation is out there.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like if you're the Ottawa Senators, where is he on the depth chart? Like
Yeah.
zero, nowhere anytime soon,
Mhm.
right? Like out of sight, out of mind. I've heard so many pro players tell me this, like even when Carey Price was out and Shea Weber was out for their long periods of injury, like if you're hurt on IR and not on the team, man, you are flat, full stop. You are not on the team,
Mhm.
like in the sense of being around the camaraderie, the chit chat, that doesn't exist. And I
Yeah.
think this is another example of this. Oh, fine. You want to play these games, pull these antics, then dude, you're just not on the team. And trust us,
Yeah.
we're good moving forward.
Yeah. And it's a shame because
And he's done this season, like so. I don't know what
yeah,
he's going to do.
like, and maybe you know this answer. Like, is he eligible to go play, like, sign an AHL contract or an ECHL contract if he doesn't have,
Yes,
like, you look at Sonny Milano, for example, like, didn't get an
correct.
NHL contract. And I know he signed before any kind of deadline. Um, but is there a deadline for AHL or ECHL?
As far if Ottawa gives him, so as far as I know, his options are he could go play pro in Europe.
Mhm.
Ottawa could sign him, or they could trade, I guess, his rights at this point. But if they trade Alex Formenton to whomever decides that they want to take him on, he is
Mhm.
ineligible, as far as I know today. He is ineligible for the rest of the season. But
Yeah.
if he takes the qualifying offer that the Ottawa Senators gave him, then he's good to go.
Yeah.
So if he wants to play hockey, his options, I believe, today are take the qualifying offer, play with Ottawa, don't take the qualifying offer, and buzz off to Europe. And that's it. Other than that, you're sitting doing nothing.
Does Like, let's say he were to take that qualifying offer, like,
Yes.
I don't even see a way that Bettman allows him to play until this investigation stuff.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, that would be the smart thing to do, which Gary Bettman isn't always guilty of. So,
Mhm.
I work with what I know, and based on what talking to Darren Dreger from TSN, that teams are looking. I think Ottawa's asked is what a second round pick for this guy if you want his
Yeah.
rights. So, like, I mean, he does seem to have the scarlet letter on him in that
Mhm.
Ottawa doesn't want him, the league perhaps doesn't want him, to the 31 other teams want him. And I get the impression today that the answer seems to be no.
Yeah, and I mean, that's how I feel, and even I feel like we're in a
Yes.
generation now where even if he was proven innocent. I feel like there would still be that negative connotation surrounding his name, and his name is kind of muddied now. And it's almost kind of like Jake Virtanen this summer whenever the Oilers offered him that PTO. And, people are like, well, what are they doing? Why are they signing him to this, professional contract? Like, and even though everything was settled, court, whatever, obviously he's good to go. And I'm not saying that's the reason he didn't make the team, but like, is this the kind of distraction you're going to want?
No. And
So,
do you even need it? Like, I'm not the best at forecasting and projecting who players are and everything else, but like, is the juice worth the squeeze here? What are we talking about? And for me, for a fragile group, I part of me is like allergic to the whole thing, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, there's such a young group in Ottawa. Like, you don't need, that negativity. You don't need those guys growing up and maturing and becoming everyday NHL players with that negativity in that dressing room. I mean, I think it just comes back to almost like the Miller in the Mayu philosophy, where it's just like players that are coming up now use these three as an example of, we're in an age where social media, everything is captured, everything is recorded, it's out there, and it's there forever.
Correct.
Yeah, really have to be careful, and
But I
hopefully,
think this Formanton, I think, is probably closer to the Mitch story than it is Logan's story.
oh, for sure, for sure.
I think Logan will play in the NHL. Whereas if we look back to the Bruins' embarrassment, and reading, and now I'm thinking about it more and more, and remember details from that story, and how heinous it was, and then the doubling down, and the lack of remorse, and the lack of reaching out. People don't forget. People have long memories with that stuff, and that's vile. That was vile. And part of me, I'm left with the impression that Alex Formanton might be in that group, as opposed to being in the Logan group, where teams are going to say, you know what, man, people aren't going to forget this Hockey Canada story and Hockey Canada scandal. I don't think is going to go away. It's a bit of a national embarrassment, and he's forever, just like so many other guys are forever linked to that. Like, it's association. Like, we talk about baseball, we talk about Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa and Rafael Palmeiro. There's direct association. You bring up those names from the early 2000s in the steroid era, I immediately make the association. And I draw a parallel line to these three guys we're talking about in the NHL.
Hopefully, I mean, I don't know the guy. Obviously, he's worked his entire career. Hopefully, he has some kind of schooling or degree that he can fall back on.
What are the odds of that?
I would probably say slim to none.
No.
And I mean,
let me tell you something. I rode the bus with the Montreal Juniors in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League for a few seasons. These guys were more interested in chicken tenders than arithmetic. Let me tell you that.
Well, that's not saying much. I'm probably more interested in chicken tenders than
who isn't? Hey, listen, let me tell you something. I'm totally with you. I love those tendos.
Yeah, we did an interview a couple weeks back with one of Mitchell Miller's classmates, and some of the stuff that he detailed was, I mean, the stuff already in the media, but learning the more that we did opens your eyes to how deep of a cut this kind of stuff does. And hopefully these guys have learned a lesson, are better people for it.
Yep.
And I mean, that's all we can hope for. And I don't think the Senators are going to get what they're asking for this guy. And I think after seeing what the Bruins just went through, signing Miller, and that's 2 years after, I know this is a little further back, but now we're reopening old wounds. I don't think they're moving Alex Formanton. I think it's Europe is his only option, or retiring from hockey at this point. We will move on. We'll get into more hockey stuff. Jason Robertson. I think very highly of this guy. Some guys in this is just guys that I know that I play fantasy hockey with, as well as reading some of the articles about him being, right up there with Sidney Crosby. I kind of have sorry, I said Sidney Crosby. I meant Connor McDavid.
Right.
which might even be a bigger gasp. But to me, there's like an echelon. There's three categories. And to me, you have your McDavid with Austin Matthews and Cale Makar as exceptional players in their own merits.
Yep.
You have your second tier, which are your great players, such as McKinnon, Draisaitl, Crosby. I mean, probably Stamkos in the last couple of years. And then you got your third tier, which are your good players, your first line centers. You know, you'd probably be looking at your Huberdeaus, your Barkovs, your your Nick Suzuki's, Nikita Kucherov, guys like that.
Mhm.
I see Jason Robertson in that tier 3. I think he's playing a little bit above his head. I don't think this pace is sustainable. So to have guys, say he's, oh wow, he's keeping up with Connor McDavid, like, I think I'd be cashing out now on that one.
Who would you rather have on your team right now, Cole Caulfield or Jason Robertson?
That's a good question. Wow.
Because remember,
are we talking about the Habs though? Like, are we talking about?
You're talking about, yes. You're taking either.
Or are we talking new franchise and we're building?
No. You've got the Canadiens roster. Take Cole Caulfield off the line with Doc and Suzuki. I'm going to ask you to put Jason Robertson on the left side of that number 1 line, right? Because Jason Robertson, and this is to me a very fascinating comp, because Jason Robertson, with his production, and which, by the way, I love the fact that he's a California kid. You know, I poke fun at Gary Bettman. This is one thing he did well when he broke ground in Western United States. And so you got a California kid who is better than a point a game as he gets close to 200 games as a sample size, and his goal per game rate is just above 0.5. He's scoring half a goal a game, more or less, in his career, which is right there with Cole Caulfield. Right there. You know, Cole Caulfield, I think, has 101 NHL games under his belt now.
Yeah.
And I think, because I did the math the other day, he went under Dominic Ducharme, scoring 0.39 goals per game to like 0.54, more or less in the Jason Robertson category. And I like to remind people, and I will do it now to your audience, never forget, under Dominic Ducharme, Cole Caulfield was a minor league hockey player. Since Dominic Ducharme got canned after the 7-1 drubbing by the Devils off the bye week, Cole Caulfield has been nothing but an elite level sniper. So when I look at Jason Robertson, I see a star. I think you're right in your assessment, in your tiers and your breakdowns of the layers going through it all. And I think there's room for Robertson to climb that ladder. And be honest, he plays on a potent line in Dallas. And Joe Pavelski is again, old man river. This guy's not going away. And we can't discount that either. The same thing to bring it back to Montreal. You know, we see Kirby Dach playing very well. You know, sometimes you're a product of your line mates. And Jason Robertson, has skill, but in order to get the wheel on the tracks and gain speed, these guys have to be together. And they've got a great line in Dallas. And Jason Robertson is a key cog. I think the mistake they made was giving him 4 years and $31 million.
Oh, and I 100%,
think that decision will come back and bite them. Yes.
So I guess as I was looking into that contract, I think the only reason Jim Nill would agree to that is because Jason Robertson comes out of that contract still being an RFA. So they still have some type of protection. I don't know.
Arbitration rights, though, I think, right? So
yeah. So I mean, it's going to go up.
It might be a one-year contract, and
yeah,
and then he'll say, "Oh, that's how you guys did me. Cool, I'm out. See you later."
Yeah, I'm surprised they anteed up with Rupe Hintz, and weren't willing to do that with Jason. And I mean, we're not privy. Maybe Jason wanted the shorter term and was betting on himself, and I'm going to make bank once the salary cap goes up in a couple of years. But I think going back to what you said about being a product of maybe Joe Pavelski and Rupe Hintz's play as well.
And Rupe's a center too, right? Is he not? So I mean, those guys, I'm always more comfortable building around a center than I am a winger.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a believer you can draft a goal scoring winger, you can trade for one. I believe you can find those guys. I'll borrow a Mark Bergevin line here. It's not easy to go out and get these centermen. You know, the Canadians have been waiting 30 years for one, and they finally got one in Nick Suzuki. You know, so I understand. You know, with the hints that they didn't bridge this guy like they did Robertson.
Mm-hmm. But I agree with what you're saying with that. Maybe he's a product a little bit of their play. I still think he's a great player on his own. But the reason I have him in that tier 3 compared to the tier 2 is just the fact where if he was on a line alone and he was playing with, you'll see in Edmonton with Connor McDavid, or if you go to somebody in my tier 2 like Draisaitl, they can play with guys that are much below their play. Almost like what Crosby had with Pascal Dupuis. Where you just throw somebody that can skate with them and it'll work out. They'll either get to the puck or they'll get the puck and they know what to do with it. Where I don't know if Jason Robertson can do that. If he was put on a line with, I'm not familiar enough with the Dallas Stars depth chart, but if we go back to what you asked about, if we had Jason Robertson on the Canadians, if we had him with, Jake Evans and Michael Pezzetta,
exactly,
Jason Robertson, a 0.5 goal scorer game, I wouldn't put a significant bet on that. Like I don't know if I'd be comfortable saying that.
Well, no, and that's the thing. Like, it's funny you bring up Pascal Dupuis with Pittsburgh, and I think of Jake Gensel, right?
Yeah,
40 goal scorer playing with Sidney Crosby. And I'm always reminded of the fact that sometimes it's not easy playing with those guys, man, because they're so fast, so ahead of the game, and they sometimes they expect you to be in the spot, and that's why you don't see a lot of great players turn into great coaches. For example, like Wayne Gretzky, where Gretzky, if he's teaching me on the ice, he's like, Shaun, how come you're not there? Why aren't you there? And I'd be like, Wayne, I don't know. Like Gretzky, they see the game, they angles you and I never see ever. And sometimes it's hard to be a teacher. How do you teach someone something that you rely purely on instinct to do?
Yeah.
And I think to match up with Crosby, to match up with McDavid, it takes a certain skill set. It takes, I bet you, thick skin too, because you're going to catch shit. Like, what do you ruined a chance there? What were you doing there? Why did you turn your brain off? Bah, 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 bah. And I really do think that's a thing. And that's why you see guys like Pascal Dupuis or, what's my favorite one? The guy who made the Olympics for Team Canada, another Crosby. Yeah, Chris Kunitz, right? Like, what are we doing here? What do we do? Chris Kunitz, Team Canada Olympian, really? But no, he gelled. He was a perfect guy for Sidney Crosby, and that's what Crosby wanted.
And you know what? It's funny you brought up the whole Wayne Gretzky and great players don't always make good coaches. We actually did a segment, one of our first episodes about that, and we dove deep into these great players, these Stanley Cup, Hockey Hall of Fame coaches, Hockey Hall of Fame players that then became coaches, and how most of them, I think there may have been one that was above 500 in their coaching. And like in Gretzky's case, 75, if not more, percent of the players returned to the team the year that Gretzky got fired. And I think it's Dave Tippett that took over from him. Right. The year after, they went from a sub 500 team to like six and change, and they made playoffs. And it was just like, it wasn't a big personnel overhaul. Like, this was different coaching. So it's interesting that you say that.
Well, look at some of the more successful managers in hockey today. Obviously, Steve Yzerman, the architect in Tampa Bay, Joe Sakic doing heavy lifting. These are star first ballot, no doubters, Hall of Famers, right? And off the top of my head, it's not like we planned to talk about this. I just brought this on, right, as part of our conversation. I'm like, Michel Therrien, plug. Marc Bergevin, plug. Claude Julien, grinder. Joe Quenneville, grinder. These a lot of these coaches have been like, I can't honestly, if I'm thinking about it, Patrick Waugh with Colorado, and history has shown the analytic guys were right that was an that year Patrick Waugh and Colorado ripped it up. That was unsustainable. And history has proven that was right. And like I'm sitting here trying to think off the top of my head in real time of star players in hockey that have parlayed their playing career into a successful coaching career. Not managing. I'm not talking managing, scouting. I'm talking about behind the like Guy Carbonneau in a moment in the sun. He won the Jack Adams, but
that's honestly as soon as you said Patrick
star
Club,
player. Like Carbo's a Hall of Famer. I don't think Carbo is a star player.
No, he's definitely not. Not in the names of in my number one echelon hierarchy, but he was a name whenever you brought up Patrick Roy. That Carbo did win the Jack Adams, and he was there 2 seasons before Randy Cunningworth took over.
Yeah, everyone was screaming from the top of the mountain saying this is a disaster. This is not going to end well, and history has shown it has not ended well.
No. Well, hopefully Martin St. Louis can be an exception to this rule, and he looks like it so far.
He looks phenomenal. Everything about this guy, I think his strongest asset is his relatability. I swear, I think the relatability factor is through the roof.
Yeah, we are covering the World Junior A Championships that are actually in Cornwall starting on Sunday. And Martin St. Louis' son, Ryan, is playing in this tournament. So I'm hoping to have a little sit down with him and kind of pick his brain of, his dad coached his team. He grew up with this guy.
Right.
What makes this guy tick?
I'd love to know.
Yeah, well, I will let you know what he says. Let's shift out west. Well, I guess we were out west. All this came from Jason Robertson. So we'll go to the Vancouver Canucks now.
Oh boy,
Thatcher Demko. We'll start with the goaltending. Out 6 weeks. They have Spencer Martin as their backup.
Yep.
As of late, they're starting to play better. I have an interesting proposition for you, and you tell me what you think.
Let's hear it.
And this is just playing fantasy NHL 23 GM mode here. Guy that's needing a fresh start, Cal Peterson. He can go to the Vancouver Canucks if LA retains salary, or LA's been looking for a forward. We just have a healthy scratch in Brock Besser.
Ooh.
Obviously, a little more, I think, would have to come back from LA for this to make sense.
Yes.
Al Peterson and something, whether that's a draft pick, a prospect, a roster player.
You want 2 number 1 goalies on your team?
Is Cal Peterson a number 1 goaltender? Like he's had 1 or 2 seasons.
Was he not last year? Was he not last year for LA?
He was, but look at Jack Campbell in Toronto. And look what he's doing in Edmonton right now.
Jack Campbell was a disaster in Toronto. Jack Campbell, I was telling everybody in August, is going to be a disaster at Edmonton, and look what's happening at Edmonton.
Well, I agree with you, but many people would say that he was a number 1 goaltender for a little bit when Freddie Anderson went down, and for half of last year before he shit the bed. Like, I think Cal Peterson kind of sits in that category. To me, he's more of a backup goaltender.
Maybe it's just because I've watched more of Jack Campbell in Toronto. Like, I really don't watch LA Kings hockey. To be honest with you.
Neither do I.
In the morning.
I'll watch the odd Edmonton or Calgary game, Vancouver, and if they're playing LA, great. I'm not seeking out any LA Kings games.
Yeah.
But I mean, I seen today that and again, I don't know if it's the truth behind it, but reporting that Brock Besser was given permission with his agent to seek out a trade. Cal Peterson obviously wants to get back to the NHL level. If a goaltender's out 6 weeks at best, I think that's an easy, hey, this kind of fits for both of us.
I get, but I mean, they did so much to make sure that Thatcher Demko was their guy, the whole Jacob Markstrom thing, and like they moved heaven and earth to make sure that Demko was their guy. It's just, I mean, and I think it ties in nicely with the whole Brock Besser, whose father had cancer, and then on Hockey Fights Cancer Night, they healthy scratched this guy. I mean, they are such a clueless, and I'll be quite honest with you at the sake of outraging your West Coast listeners. I think the Vancouver Canucks fan base is the worst fan base in hockey. I do not like the Vancouver Canucks fan base. I think they're classless. I think they say all sorts of dumb things. I think about the time Jesperi Kotkaniemi was in the news when he was a Montreal Canadian, and what happened there with Elias Pettersson in that game at the Bell Center a few years ago. And I still have the bitter taste in my mouth with the whole Stanley Cup final and how it went sideways. I just think, honestly, I think this is a low-level fan base, and it coincides with their organization, a low-level organization that's poorly run, embarrassing star players, and now at the request of asking to be traded, and they got a spaghetti-faced Bruce Boudreau behind the bench, mixing things up all over the place. I mean, I have no faith that this organization, I'm even comfortable telling you, I have more faith in the Ottawa Senators finding stability and finding normalcy than I do the Vancouver Canucks with this disaster that's going on with Brock. They should be embarrassed. They embarrassed a star player. They healthy scratched the star player. What are you doing?
Well, not just that, but like you said, you scratch him on a night that means a lot to the player and is a prime, how would you say that? Like advertisement for this celebration or recognition that they're doing with his father having had cancer.
Yeah.
You had the opportunity to move him in the offseason because he was a free agent. He just signed this extension. And you instead sign him, you give him the money he wanted on a short bridge deal, and then you go and healthy scratch him.
Yeah.
I don't get it either. Especially there's, I think, a lot more players that are probably deserving of being healthy scratched in that lineup. And I just kind of laughed, whenever you got a spaghetti face Bruce Boudreau. That reminded me of Brandon Press calling Paul McLean a bug-eyed walrus.
Yes. Player 81. It was a Rafi Diaz, right?
Rafael Diaz, yeah.
Yeah. No, it was great. And I think there's been the guys at TSN, Dreger and company have been all over this story in Vancouver. And I believe what they're saying in that, and it makes sense, right? The more you think about it, we're not talking about a fringe player. We're not talking about a player that that is on a contract year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did he not just get a contract in July of this past summer?
He signed July, 3 years, and I want to say 6.5 or something like that, right? for 3 years, and there's no move, so they can move him at any time.
Correct. So there's the ink isn't even dry on the contract yet. And my gut tells me there's no way Boudreau does this without approval. I don't think Boudreau has the clout to make a decision like that one, to healthy scratch a player like Besser. So the message sending business or tearing it down because they don't believe in this guy. There's going to be a lineup around the block for Brock Besser, for 3 years left and just over $6 million per season. So good luck on you, Vancouver. You get what you deserve,
Oh, 100%. I think you almost have to at this point continue making them healthy scratch because you now know that this relationship is soured. You know that there's going to be a trade. It's imminent. There's no way that he's staying in Vancouver past the deadline.
Yeah.
You're going to risk injury and his value going down. To me at this point, a trade's going to have to be, maybe it's on the Christmas break, maybe it's right after, maybe it's a little before. But something's happening soon. And to me, sooner rather than later, you keep him as a healthy scratch. I don't believe in the whole go out and find a team that wants to, and then we'll figure something out. To me, that's kind of a Bush League move. I don't really like that. That's one thing in free agency, to have your agent do some legwork. But if you're an NHL GM, you want to hold as many cards as possible in your hand. And to me, that gives power to everybody else, leverage to everybody else.
Yeah, well, look, I found the tweet I wanted to read to you that came from Thomas Drance, right, covering the Canucks, on Brock Besser getting the scratch. Quote, "It was a very important game for me and my family." Talking about when Besser was healthy scratch for the Hockey Fights Cancer game. Besser's dad passed away and lost his battle with cancer. "So when I came in this morning and my name wasn't on the whiteboard, it hurt. It hurt real bad." That's Brock Besser to reporters when he found out he was a healthy scratch. So, I understand these guys are young. They have egos and they have feelings. Clearly, Brock Besser's telling everybody in plain English, in bold capital letters, he was hurt and hurt bad by that decision. And I don't think he's going to forget that. And I'm not surprised that his agent, he's so upset. I mean, that's probably the first call you make. You don't even call your mother. You call your agent and say, get me out of this town now.
Yeah.
They don't appreciate me? Good. I can't wait to come back and score 4 goals on them next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like Tyler Toffoli did against the Vancouver Canucks whenever he returned.
Yeah.
You didn't want to give me your contract? Here you go. It was fantastic. I loved watching that.
That was so much fun. That was so much fun. That was one of the best parts about the All-Canadian division.
It was. The amount of times that you got to see teams that you didn't, other than the famous Western road trip that the Habs do once a year around this time, you don't really see them. You see them twice a year. But, let alone the walking in and seeing your name on a whiteboard. Like, that's how you find out you're being scratched on a big game. Not even weak. Patrick Alvin, let's go for dinner. Come to my office. Let's talk. There's Cami Granato. There's, Patrick Alvin, Bruce Boudreau. Let's kind of talk this through, let you know what's happening. To find out on the whiteboard, to me, the whole move is a slap in the face, but that's knocking you down and then spitting on you.
Well, look, I mean, there's a direct correlation too, right, to the Canadians to bring it back. That these players, it's a small world there. They all talk to each other and they see the clown antics that are being pulled at Vancouver. You're going to tell me with a straight face a player that isn't motivated solely by money is going to want to go play for that team and that organization? Like, you see how some of their players are treated, and a lot of players share agents. A lot of players hang out with each other, train together in the off season. Lots of conversations are had. And I mean, what flattering words are coming back about the Vancouver Canucks? 0 is the answer. 0.
No, I agree. And I mean, this isn't the first time, and it's not even just a one management thing. And I think it comes back to what you said. It starts with ownership. I mean, they made a joke whenever they traded Roberto Luongo back to Florida because Corey Schneider's their guy. And then they trade Corey Schneider.
Yeah.
What's happening? Like the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. All right, we can talk about another player that was kind of exiled by his former team and ended up elsewhere in Sean Monahan. I think he's been a terrific fit so far in Montreal, and what most people probably considered a gamble. Low risk, high reward in a sense. And now we're kind of talking as we're getting into the Christmas break. What are we doing with him? Guys are saying, he's 28, same age as Joel Armia. We're doing the youth movement. We're getting younger guys. Is this the kind of guy you'd like to resign? Is this a guy we're going to cash in on a trade value? To me, there's not too many guys that like playing in Montreal, find success in Montreal, have the caliber of Sean Monahan and end up in Montreal. To me, if he wants to re-sign, as long as Kent Hughes or Jeff Gordon, whoever's in that negotiation, is saying, this is the dollar in a year that we're willing to go, and he falls somewhere in there, I'm okay with him staying.
Oh, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. I'm just going to hang up on the Zoom call. Nice talking with you. Enjoy your podcast. All the best, everybody. Goodbye. No, I'm not. No. Stop. Sean Monahan, goodbye. Keep scoring. Score. Trade him. Full stop. If you told me the Montreal Canadiens were fighting for the second spot in the Atlantic, fighting for the number 1 spot with Boston in the division, for a top seed in the Eastern Conference, I got all the time in the world for you. I think the reality sets in that the Montreal Canadiens have the second toughest schedule. What's left to be played? Only the Florida Panthers have a harder schedule that's left. Montreal is next. And I think the reality of this team being kind of where they are will settle in. I am a huge law of averages guy. And I think the law of averages for the Montreal Canadiens will ultimately prevail. And, Ken Hughes, who's got 2 first-round picks, and the Florida pick is looking better and better because they're hot garbage and they're hurt. And I'm optimistic about that. But he has said that he wants a first pick in the first round this summer. How do you get there? Joel Edmondson, a combination of Joel Edmondson and remember, Ben Sherratt got you a first last year.
Yeah.
And if Joel Edmondson could stop cross-checking people in the face and getting thrown out of hockey games, I think Joel Edmondson is more valuable than Ben Sherratt was.
So, 100%. 100%.
So exactly. So if we're of the same mind there, the Montreal Canadiens should be in the business of building. And look, I can make an argument about the value of veterans like Corey Perry and Cole Caulfield still reaches out to Corey Perry when he has questions that he needs experience to help him sort through. There is a lot of value there. Sean Monahan, did you know Sean Monahan is the same age as Josh Anderson? They're both 28 years old. But sometimes I look at Monahan, he's like, he's like 40. He's pushing 40. His body's rebuilt, held together by titanium and aluminum foil and everything else. And now we're talking about a guy who has found a comfortable place, is competing, feels chemistry. Give this guy what he wants, man. Let him go to a contending team. Let him go chase that Stanley Cup, and maybe the Montreal Canadiens will be wealthier because of it.
So do you see then? So I guess my thinking behind keeping Sean Monahan is, to me, there's a difference between a veteran like Corey Perry or Nate Thompson coming into the Canadiens, let's say, in what they bring to the table and experience compared to, and I'm not looking at age, I'm solely looking at the type of player these people are. Sean Monahan being a high-level pick. Sean Monahan being a 30-goal scorer in the league. To me, it's a different type of vet player in a different type of experience and knowledge in teaching that he can provide those younger players. To me, that's where my head's at when I say keep Sean Monahan. And I have nothing against a Nate Thompson or what Corey Perry brings to the table in their type of player, but very different set of skills, very different type of player.
Correct.
Do you think that brings anything different to the table, experience-wise, or I don't want to even say work ethic-wise, but like the type of skill that you have is so different in your bag of tricks that you can help with, let's say, a Cole Caulfield or a Nick Suzuki that have that set of talent, even a Kirby Dach.
Sure.
These guys are all under 25.
Absolutely. But remember, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield were key components in the Montreal Canadiens winning 1, 2, 3 rounds and 1 game in the Stanley Cup final. So, that's my argument for those that talk about pressure. That's my argument for those that talk about lack of experience. I still, despite the team's success, look, they're further away from a playoff spot today than they were when I left work on Friday into the weekend. They're 4 points out of a playoff spot. Who knows what happens in Vancouver on Monday night. But when I look at this team, I'm still the same mindset. Even though they won't admit it, they're still rebuilding. They're still resetting, retooling, whatever R word you want to throw in here that applies. I get it. And I do believe that the Sean Monahans of the world can be found, I'm going to say, easily. And as opposed to finding a healthier, fresher version of that, it seems to me to be more of a challenge. And so you maximize what you can get out of Sean Monahan, every ounce of this guy's good hockey that you can get. And I think it's a win-win. You can maybe get a nice asset if you want to package it, or and it's a win for the player because maybe he leaves Montreal feeling good about this team, spreads the word about how awesome Caulfield and Suzuki are and what a good veteran they have and a calm leader in Jake Allen in the net and a budding superstar in Caden Gooley. And word gets around that Montreal's a fun place to play because they got a great coach who's relatable and gets the modern game and isn't afraid to encourage his guys to score goals and think differently. So all of those are massive sell points for me. And it just makes the Canadiens, I think, a chance to be richer, a chance to be deeper, to go and find a stud in the draft somewhere because Sean Monahan and the trade got you that guy. And I don't know if Sean Monahan next year or the year after that brings this team any closer to where I want them to be. And that's, I want them to be Tampa Bay. I want every single year you're contending for divisions. The expectation is conference finals, Stanley Cup finals. And every time your team rolls into whatever barn they're playing, it's, oh, God, we got this team tonight. That's what I want for the Montreal Canadiens. How do I get there?
So we'll do a little role play. You're Kent Hughes or Jeff Gordon. Trade deadline.
Ooh, I like this show. Go ahead.
You have to move Sean Monahan. What's your ask? If trade deadline is today based on what he's done so far.
Yeah, I want a second round pick.
Okay, now I'm
I don't
Jeff
think
Gordon
Sean
or
Monahan
Kent
gets you a
Hughes.
first round pick. Yeah.
So I'm now Jeff Gordon or Kent Hughes, and your opposing team's GM, and I say the ask is a second round pick. Do you give that for Sean Monahan?
Who are you?
I'm in this scenario now. I am
Yeah.
Jeff Gordon or Kent Hughes, and I'm saying to you, Sean,
Yeah.
uh,
Give me a
my
second
ask
round
for
pick and
Sean
he's your
Monahan.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to make that move. I'm ready to make that move.
Okay. Well, you're consistent. I like that. I know what I'm getting with you.
Yeah. Look, I
So
have a
we'll
lot of time for veterans. Um, I just think the timing is off. I just think the timing isn't right.
yeah. So we'll go to another veteran then, and you kind of mentioned it a few minutes ago with Joel Edmondson, cross
Mm.
check to the face, reckless,
Zach
unneeded.
Hyman, who doesn't want to cross check Zach Hyman in the face?
That's true. I mean, he's a silkier Brendan Gallagher.
Yes.
So I understand the appeal for sure. But like you said, unnecessary 5-minute penalty, kicked out of the game. Like I felt that he is a more effective Ben Sherratt. And I mean, Ben Sherratt last year with the points that he put up, you're never going to see that again in his career.
Yes.
I think he's a better version of Ben Sherratt. I just don't know, does this hurt his value with the injuries that he's had? I think it's going to come to a point where we're going to have to start moving defensemen soon because San Jose said they'd listen on Erik Karlsson. Anaheim's going to start selling off on Shattenkirk, Klingberg, potentially Cam Fowler. I think it's going to be a domino effect. So you want to be that first one that sets that market, right?
Yep.
You want to get there quick because if you gave me a choice between Joel Edmondson and Cam Fowler or Joel Edmondson, Shattenkirk, or Joel Edmondson and different category completely, Erik Karlsson, his name goes down that depth chart a little bit.
Well, for sure. And especially, I mean, we got to talk contracts and Edmondson still has term left. He's got 1 year left on his current deal, versus a guy like Erik Karlsson that is a completely different skill set, contract, everything else, versus, some other defensemen. And especially when it comes to the sell job of Edmondson, for example, we're talking about a Stanley Cup winner. And to answer your question about health and durability, you got to see it first before you believe it. You got to make sure that this guy's playing hard minutes, playing quality minutes, can show that he's durable. And he has had some bad luck. He had some family issues there with his dad and everything else that kind of put pause on his road to recovery. So I think if with a track record of him playing regularly, like I said, good minutes against good opposition and showing that he's strong and durable, I have no doubt that I guess in a perfect world, you would hope that he'd be like Ben Sherratt and he'd be in a contract year and, you just get him as a rental player and teams would be more willing to pick up that rental price and pay a steeper price for it than taking on what's left in a 1 year contract. But ultimately, outside
I think for what
of
you're getting, though, he's on a fair contract.
question. And in terms of trying to fulfill what Kent Hughes wants, and that's high end picks, outside of trading Cade and Gooley, I mean, this is the guy. This is the guy that's going to hopefully get you that net return. But he's got to show it. He's got to show that he's healthy, right?
Yeah. We'll stick with one more Habs question before we move on. Samuel Montembeault, the way he's playing, I would like to see him get the crease a little more. And I'm not, one of those guys that's, he's French. We need a French goalie. We need X amount of French players on the team. But I think his numbers have spoken for himself. Do I think he's a number one? No. Do I think he's better than Jake Allen's backup? Yes. Do you think that he deserves a little more playing time?
No, I think it's handled correctly. I do. I think, and it goes to show you that this team is is not thinking about Connor Bedard or Filippelli or Michkov or anybody. They're thinking about the Vancouver Canucks tonight, the Kraken on Tuesday night, and what goaltender gives them the best chance at 2 points. And whether it's in tandem with the coaching staff, Martin St. Louis bench, I think, has done a good job in picking who starts, who's going, who's not going. Like we saw last week when Jake Allen, had holes in his game, especially early on. They say, okay, we're gonna skip up the rotation, and Sam Montembeault is going to go because it gives the team a better chance at winning. So, like you, I don't think he's a first string goalie. I think he's an NHL goalie. I don't think there's a guy that belongs in the American Hockey League. But it goes to show you the margins are so thin, right? From a guy that can carry the load and play every night, or most of the games, I should say. Nobody plays every night anymore. And look who he's fighting with, Jake Allen. Jake Allen, man, this guy's got the pedigree, brother. I watched him in junior. I watched him with Montreal. I watched him in Drummondville. I've never seen, and I hate to say this because it sounds mean, but I've never seen Jake Allen win a big game. Whether it's in the queue, whether it's with Team Canada, or whether he lost his net to a guy who likes punching hockey players, like Jason Zucker, Jordan Bennington, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, and that's unfortunately that's the lay of the land for Jake Allen, and I think he's good with it. He seems very calm, very understanding of the reality, and I think it shows the margins. They're so thin. So I think the Montreal Canadiens basically have two backup goaltenders that are fighting to play every night.
Yeah. Do you think, and this is hypothetical, and this isn't even a question I had written down.
Oh boy.
Do you think the next starting goaltender, because we got, in my opinion, a lot of backups in our organization, do we have the next starting goaltender in-house, or is this going to be a free agency or a trade?
Now, is your question, did the Canadiens have a number one goaltender in their system? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't
Me
think
neither.
so. And it's tough, right? Because the Laval Rocket are bad. Because all of the players I thought would be with them are with the Canadiens.
Yeah.
So I feel a little bit for Jean-Francois Houle. And Caden Primo. Caden Primo's regular season numbers aren't great. But look what he did in the playoffs. And legacies are made, right? Like, you're defined by what you do in the playoffs for the most part as a hockey player. And he was full value for the Rocket in that Calder chase last summer. But in terms of consistent sample size, I'm no goalie whisperer, man. I can't sit here honestly and say, you watch, mark my words, mark the date down. December 5th, 2022, Caden Primo is going to win the Vezina. I can't say that I see it because we haven't seen consistency that shows you that he's ready for the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in seeing what Frederick Deschaux has to offer, but I'm not holding my breath. I guess I just have, growing up for me, it went very quickly from QA to Carey Price to splitting time with Halak to Carey Price being our full-on guy. I can't see, to me to think, okay, maybe they go get this guy from this team. There's no name that sticks out to me that I'm like, that makes sense. Or I can see this. I can envision this.
Well, there was a point last year where I was arguing the Canadiens should go out and get Varlamov, right? But that ship has sailed clearly.
Yeah.
And when and it's funny you talk about this, right? Because I'm 44. My entire life watching the Montreal Canadiens, the goaltender has been the best player. The goaltender has been the face of the organization. Like, I live next to the Bell Center. I drove home today. I drive by the Bell Center every single day. Carey Price's gigantic face covers up the entire facade of the Bell Center. My entire life, the goalie has been the star, the heartbeat, the face of the franchise. I am here today to declare I am ready for change. I am ready for Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Caden Gooley. I was going to say Jonathan Drouin, but I'm not drunk. But it can't be the goalie anymore. And it's time to do something different. And I don't see a goaltender coming that's the next version of Carey Price where the Canes are going to get this guy at 5 overall or whatever. And, the lack of consistency that we see with inside the organization, I'm okay with it because go out there and score goals, be offensive minded, be creative, be daring, and you can go out and get a goaltender, and you don't have to pay $10.5 million for it either.
Oh, for sure not. And you know what? The way that the league's going, and again, like I was talking earlier about the shifts, where 6-7 years ago, most starting goaltenders were playing 55 to 65 games a season.
Yeah.
Barry Price is in there. Connor Hellebuck was in there. Now you maybe have 5 guys in the league: Shesterkin, Markstrom, Vasilevsky, Demko last year. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head. I guess Toronto was hoping Jack Campbell would be that next guy.
Yes.
Maybe Frederick Anderson a little bit in Carolina before his injury, which seems to be yearly. That are able to play at that pace. It's all tandems now. So we don't need another Carey. We don't need the next Carey Price. We just need the next 1A
Yes.
to play to Jake Allen's 1, I'll say C, because I don't think he's a 1B. Jake Allen may not be that guy by the time this guy comes around, but to me, we need to focus more on a tandem, but I still don't think we have anybody that has a 1 with an A or a B next to their name.
For sure. Like, the only one name that UC Saros, this guy plays a shit ton too. He plays he plays high 60s, right?
5.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that was the one guy. I was like, there's Saros in Nashville.
You know what? They have a young prospect, Yaroslav Askarov.
Yeah, right.
He's going to be phenomenal too. And they're going to end up in a situation where by the time that Saros is ready to kind of move on, or they're ready to move on from him, this next guy's coming right up. Good problem to have.
A great problem to have. Great problem to have.
So we'll stick with goaltenders, but we'll shift back out west, and Jack Campbell.
Yeah.
It registered in my head the same. I knew what I was saying, but it sounded weird.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack Campbell lost his crease to Stuart Skinner, which I don't think. I mean, I knew he wasn't. Or personally, I think he's not a number 1 goaltender, Jack Campbell. I did not expect him to be this bad, this quick, and I definitely did not expect Stuart Skinner to step up and be as good as he is. Not that he's playing phenomenal, but he's better than the glimpses that he's shown in the past couple of years. Yep. I've seen some articles in the last few days talking about the Oilers potentially doing the same thing with Campbell that the LA Kings did with Cal Peterson, where it's throw you on waivers, hopefully somebody picks you up, have fun in Bakersfield.
Mm-hmm.
They're another team in a situation where they don't really have any. Like, Stuart Skinner was their 3rd guy. Mike Smith is, was signed to be that backup. Another guy, that can probably get put on waivers, and Edmonton Oilers fans hope he gets taken, is that GM.
Well, that's where I was going to start. Look who
Ken
the
Holland
is there.
Ken Holland, questionable calls at best.
I would say
Detroit at the end.
For sure, disaster. It's a disaster. It's hiring Peter Chiarelli again. It's just not going to end well. And I don't know, man. I always want to give the benefit of the doubt to some of these managers and scouts and coaches and commissioners that, you're in the position for a reason. At least I thought so, as opposed to nepotism or good looks or whatever it is. But I knew it. My mother's in her late 60s. She knew Jack Campbell wasn't going to do anything in Edmonton. We all knew it. We all knew that you're putting your eggs in Jack Campbell's basket. He had an all-star team in front of him and couldn't do anything with Toronto. And what you're going to put him on a team at Edmonton? Darnell Nurse is a train wreck. You know what I mean? Edmonton's defense is bad. And outside of their 3 super studs in McDavid, Draisaitl, and RNH, you're going to ask Darnell Nurse and Jack Campbell to do the heavy lifting? Ken Holland, that is such an indictment of such bad management. And I swear to you that if hockey was thriving in the United States and hockey had basketball's attention to the level that it does, Connor McDavid would have been out of Edmonton 2 years ago. You know, and if he wasn't, he'd be out of there this season. Like, you can't put up with this crap. Like, where are you going? What are you doing? You know, like Bob McKenzie said it best when he joined us years ago on the morning show when the Oilers and McDavid was winning Hart trophies and scoring titles and everything else. And they missed the playoffs and they missed the playoffs. He called it a crime against hockey humanity. And he was 1,000% right. And bringing Jack Campbell in to be the savior is a crime against hockey humanity again.
They're definitely not doing right by Connor or Leon or RNH, really. And I think Taylor Hall was happy with his decision to jump ship when he did. I mean, that Oilers defense is dog shit.
Yep.
Absolute dog shit.
What are you going to do with that?
I like Darnell Nurse. I think he's more of a 3-4 guy than he is a 1-2.
Sure.
You know, I think they're hoping Bouchard pans out. There's another one. Who is it? Is it Raphael Lavoie?
Correct.
They're hoping pans out back there. Like, I don't know. They're a mess. I think when it comes to the hiring, everybody looks at when Peter Chiarelli got fired in Boston. Oh, that's a name. That's a big name. You know, same thing. Ken Holland parts ways in Detroit. Oh, yeah, big name. Yeah, okay. And I think you're starting to see now teams be a little more comfortable giving it over to rookie guys, like you seen Montreal do with Kent Hughes.
Yep.
And we talked shit about him a little earlier, but rookie guy in Patrick Alvin. At some point, the Jimmy Rutherfords and the Ken Hollands and the Chiarellis, they're gone. They're done. Dave Talon, Scotty Bowman's. Like, it's time for the next era to come through. Hockey mentality isn't the same. Why you would ever give 40-year-old Mike Smith a contract is, with his history, his injury history, is fucked beyond compare. I don't know. Like,
that's hockey, though. But it's like you said, it is
so bad for Connor McDavid. I feel so bad for this guy because
he makes $12 million a year. Don't feel too bad for Connor McDavid. He's going to be okay.
I just feel bad watching these games and just seeing there's only so much this guy can do on his own. And same thing with Draisaitl. And other than when they're on the power play, like, it's so goddamn frustrating. Like, I couldn't imagine having to go to work every day and know this is as best as it's going to get. And I think it's maybe time. Is it Daryl Kratz that still owns that team? Maybe it's time that he takes a look at
and it's funny,
that.
Like, I sat when I played in the NHL coaches tournament last summer, a big golf tournament, and when the draft was here, so all the GMs and all the coaches were here, and I got to sit with Jay Woodcroft for about 90 minutes. We were having dinner, drinking wine, shooting the shit, talking about Brett Kulak. I know Kulak a little bit, and so we were talking about, like, Kulak was texting me, talking about how much in awe he was of Connor McDavid. Like, there was a point last year where McDavid came in the second intermission and basically did the equivalent of flipping the Gatorade table over, and was reading the riot act about how dog shit the team was. And, we're not losing this game, right? And more or less willed the Oilers to a win. And, guys like Kulak are just in awe watching him. And, Jay Woodcroft was like, he's a freak. He's rarer than a generational talent is how rare McDavid is, and he wants it bad, real bad. So, I think it's a fascinating storyline. And I don't really have faith that the Oilers are going to right this ship. And the fascinating part is, what does McDavid do? What is he going to do? Is he just going to stay in Edmonton and be the good Canadian boy? Or is he going to say, hey, listen, this isn't good enough anymore. And I'm better than this. And it's time to make a decision.
A likely scenario I see, which may be an unpopular opinion, is Connor McDavid walking upstairs to that GM's office or president, I don't know who their CEO of hockey ops is, and saying it's him or me. Like, something's got to give.
Lowe or something.
Yeah. Well, Shaun, I thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute blast. I'd love to have you back on in the future. And I look forward to listening to you again tomorrow morning.
You're the best. Thank you so much. I wish you success. And for sure, throw me out an invite. I'd love to come back on.
All right, this is a new segment that we have. It's called 5 Minutes for Fighting. We are going to talk with some local hockey scrappers. Paul Shantz, who's played in the Federal Hockey League, the LNAH, amongst other Quebec major hockey leagues. He did some stints in the minors as well. No shyness of dropping the mitts. The other one we have is my cousin and good friend, Corey Payment, who has also played in the Federal Hockey League and the LNA. And we're gonna talk strictly kind of the rough stuff of hockey. We'll talk a bit of the NHL stuff, but some stories of things I'm sure you guys have seen and heard that people wouldn't believe unless you guys were actually telling.
Okay. Well, you've got one right guy in this, but I don't know if you got the right guy looking at. Right?
Come on, Corey.
I've seen you fight a couple times. You're a big boy. You can hold your own.
Oh,
There you go.
I can hold on for dear life. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Come
I mean,
on.
like the one video I sent you. We won't show that one, and I won't even tell people where to go find that.
You know what? You should show people that, because the new podcast from Spittin' Chicklets, check the game notes there with Colby Armstrong and that. This guy did not check the game notes. Joe Pell from New York, when I was with Akwesasne Warriors, had about 350 minutes for 5 years in a row. Little guy, not very big, and he gave me the beating of my life.
Oh, you
I
fought Joe
remember-
Pelly?
Yeah, stupid.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea who he was.
Holy
Show up in
shit.
the league there. Oh yeah, who's this guy? Who's this little fella? I'll smack him
Yeah.
around. No,
Well, I went to the game with your dad and your brother, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what we thought. I'm sitting next to your brother, and Connie goes, I think Corey's gonna go with this guy. Tommy and I are like, oh yeah, he's gonna kick the fucking shit out of this guy. Like, this guy's like 5'9". And then, we're like, okay, it's looking pretty good. And then he just like gets like a fucking terrible munchkin, just gets in your way and starts getting at you.
he had my. I couldn't get loose. I couldn't get loose for the. He had it tied up like Serge Roberge there. Just wrapped me up like I was like this. I couldn't get my arms free at all, and he was teeing off on me. I was like, what the hell's going on here? But
Well, you know what, Corey? This might help you out here. He fought Mike Stacy. I saw him fight Mike Stacy, and Mike had his arms. Il y avait son assiette pleine. I'm telling you. Oh, no, Mike was surprised, obviously, but Mike Stacy, we're not talking about anybody here. Mike, I know,
He could fight.
Bungo, Mike, for sure.
yeah,
That's a tough guy, that guy, for sure.
yeah. I had my hands full. I had my bad idea jeans on before I went on into that game.
Bad idea, jeans, man. That's all right. Oh, la, la.
So, Joe Pelly caught Corey off guard. Paul, is there anybody that you've ever fought that you're just like, yeah, I'll fucking kill this guy? Like, there's no chance. And any surprise?
Not that I thought I'd have it'd be a walk in the park, but I used to fight Steve Tardif Jr. Like, we used to fight every game, and I played with him after that in St. George de Beauce in the North American League. But the first year I fought him almost every game, and he was a little smaller than me, maybe. And then, which was rare for anybody fighting in the back then. But so the first year we fought almost every game, everything's fine. The year after, as I was playing as overage 20-year-old, and I fought him in Laval, and he's the only guy, and I repeat myself, the only guy in hockey that knocked me out. And he knocked me out. He hit me with the left hand. He just caught me right in the jaw, and I sat down, just turned the lights right out. That was the only guy that knocked me out. Yeah, Steve Tardif, which is a great guy, a good friend of mine. I played with him for a couple of years in St. Georges, but yeah, I got surprised that time. I was, that's, you never, c'était pas cool, ça.
World Junior A Challenge in town. We have 5 teams, a couple Canada teams, USA, Sweden, Latvia. Just a little tournament in town. Joel and I are lucky enough to be to attend the games. We'll be interviewing players, coaches. Should be a cool experience, and we're excited to share it with you. So we'll catch you next week. Have a good one.
Scouts, this is where they come to get a real good look at some top prospects.
This is a big event on the scouting calendar.
The World Junior A Challenge is back. Names like McCarr, Bernard Docker, Bozer, and Pasternak have got their start at the tournament. And now hockey's next generation gets its turn in Cornwall. Visit hockeycanada.ca/tickets to buy your packages today.